on Instagram, we did start with our coming out, and we talked a lot about where we've come from. And then we paused for maybe like a year where we stopped doing this as
Yeah, we were doing the wedding.
Yeah, we were busy with the wedding and all those things. And then, hindsight, we're like, yeah, we should have been recording that whole process. But I think that speaks to our entire lives aren't lived on social media, right? Some things are not just private, but sacred.
Welcome to the ZAMI NOBLA National Organization of Black Lesbians on Aging podcast. We are your sound source for Black lesbian herstory. I'm your host, Angela Denise Davis. It is a sacred thing to share your story. I think even more so when you do it in a very public way, as through a podcast, through your social media networks, vlogging, and putting yourself out there. Our guests today, Kendra and Cyndi, share information about their This Is Us Unscripted Sunday series, which they publish on TikTok and Instagram. As well as some information about their lives, how they came together, how they came to understand themselves as women who are same-gender loving, Black lesbian, queer, and all of that. We're going to talk about that and so much more. But just another beautiful conversation with two of our sisters around love and life and what it means to share your sacred stories with the world.
My name is Kendra Bryant, and I'm a 44-year-old lesbian, and I show up in the world in between Black nationalism and Alice Walker's womanism, and as a regular teacher in the classroom and outside of it, an aspiring poet, essayist, shit starter.
Yeah. Okay. And I am Cyndi Ixchele, Friday Aya. I am 53 years old, a Black queer woman. I show up in the world mostly as a psychotherapist these days. Also as a mother. I show up as a mom, a friend, a confidant, someone who enjoys the esoteric, the spiritual, all things metaphysical.
Well, Kendra and Cyndi, we are so glad that you are here as part of the ZAMI NOBLA Podcast, where we celebrate just the joy of having conversations and really preserving a legacy of what it means to be a Black lesbian at this point in time in the world, and also to be able to give folks a chance of knowing what is possible. And I've had the chance, Kendra, of being in your company for a number of years, but Cyndi, you're new to me. But one of the things that I so enjoy is the way in which you are doing your This Is Us, your unscripted series on, is it just Instagram and Facebook, or is it multi-platform beyond that?
Yes, we record for Twitter. No, excuse me, TikTok. Which is why we try to keep it at 10 minutes because that's TikTok's allotment. And so we started on Instagram.
We did.
And so because we started on Instagram and folks who we were our original audience was like, we don't have TikTok. We recorded for TikTok, then also put it on Instagram, and then Instagram pushes it to Facebook.
Lovely, lovely. And that's where I usually catch it on Facebook. And we'll give folks an opportunity in our show notes to connect with the links so that they can appreciate what you all are doing, because I think it's absolutely fantabulous. I love it. I love it. I love it.
Yeah, thank you.
I'd like to start with our guest by just telling a little bit about where you grew up and what was the first point of your coming to understand who you are in this world as a Black lesbian and as a Black queer woman.
Mm-hmm. I can go first.
Okay.
Go first.
Either way.
I'm from Miami, Florida, And I grew up as a twin. I'm a fraternal twin, and I have an older sister, 6 years older than I am. And as a twin, even though we are fraternal, and when you're in relationship with people, that's how you get to know who you are. But when you are a twin, you especially at a young age, I think, find your differences and similarities with people. And my twin sister Kylie was much more feminine than I. She had many more boyfriends. She wore heels and the makeup and the curling iron and the microwave ponytails and just all of those things. And she and my older sister Kim, in that way, were very much alike and still are. I then was, I don't know if this is even correct to say this anymore, but was a tomboy, right? Um, and I don't know if I would have realized my being such a tomboy if I didn't have a twin sister who was so different physically than I am. Even in her sexual maturity and body was I was flat chested. She had the big breast. Cycles earlier than mine. All of those things, and so I was really aware of that. And I was a little rough around the edges too, as far as not minding being outside, being dirty, letting dogs chase me on the bike and stuff like that. But when it came to my sexual preferences, I didn't realize that until I was probably 17 and was still unsure. And I say that because I had boyfriends, but the nerd in me and the fear of getting pregnant would not allow me to have sex. Even if my body wanted to go there, I was too afraid. And so my first sexual encounter was with a woman who was a mentor. Um, and she was 20 something years my elder. And I loved her and she loved me. And even in my confusions, I wanted to be closer to her than we were. And it seemed the next thing to do is to be intimate sexually. And of course, the nerd in me said, I'm going to wait till I'm 18. It felt like the right age. And because I wanted to be legal, I was 17 when I was with this older woman. And that was my first sexual relationship. And so I feel like that sexual relationship informed much of my sexuality because as I've continued to move through the world, and grow in my body and understand sexuality and gender and performance and desire. There are times when I realize I like to be in relationship with women, but I could probably easily have sex with a man, right? And so Cyndi and I've had conversations, not as in depth, I think, but we've had conversations. She's asked me recently, why don't you just identify as queer? And I said, because for 30 something years, I've been identifying, or almost 30 something years, as lesbian. I don't want to flip the script. And then my folks are confused, right? And so I stick with lesbian. And because I'm in a relationship, in a marriage with a woman, I feel like I am engaging in lesbian lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Interesting. Thank you. Cyndi, what about you?
Well, I was born in a small town called Dallas in North Carolina. And I guess my exploration or my self-discovery was a bit different. Though I had a knowing really early about how I felt about girls. But it wasn't okay. It wasn't okay. It didn't feel okay. Somehow I understood that. So maybe some nonverbals. I don't remember my mom saying anything directly against gay or lesbian community. I am my only child by my mother and father, though they had children much older than myself. So I grew up as an only child, though I had three siblings in the same house. They were just much older than me. And then my father had five children who were outside of my home that I got to know later as an adult. Probably about the same age as Kendra. I was a driving age. I had a crush on one of my friends. And I started picking her up and taking her to school. And, I would find myself just kind of staring and wanting to get closer. But I knew I couldn't. And I didn't give a whole lot of metacognition to what is really happening at 16. But I think my mom may have known something was going on there because she told me I had to stop picking her up. that she was using me. Digressing a bit, I also had some friends in middle school who were gay and lesbian, though those titles weren't what we used then, if we used any title. And my mom knew that. And so I remember her asking me, why all these girls coming over here that like girls? And I consciously was not available to that conversation. So I just told her, I don't know. But looking back, I'm sure they felt or sensed something about me too. There were peaks and points that I could see or felt closeness or wanting to engage women, but was too afraid of rejection, what might be said. And all of these women were, just like myself, presenting straight, or young women were presenting straight. It wasn't until later in my life, probably in my 30s, this kept recycling. You know, there were always women that I was having a crush on or having thoughts about, but never shared it with a person, not one person. And I really wouldn't have the conversation within myself about what I was thinking and what I was feeling. I would think it, feel it, and move on. It wasn't until grad school I befriended someone. I was in my late 30s. And it was in that friendship that I began to really play with this idea and began to really ask myself, what is going on here? Do you like her? You know, do you want to be intimate with her? And so my answer back to myself was, no, that's not what it is. That's not what it is. And I found myself, we were going out to hang out, us and some other lady friends. And I found myself as I was getting ready for that outing that I, in my head, was getting ready for her. I was putting on my makeup, thinking about her. So that's when I could no longer throw it away. But it was still a few years later, several years later, before I fully emerged and accepted who I am. At that time, and I want to say too much, but at that time I was married to a man. So, and I had children. So that complicated at that time my process.
Now, when you describe yourself, you talk about being a Black queer woman as opposed to a Black lesbian. What does that distinction mean for you?
Like Kendra, the choosing of queer, it seems like it represents more of my story because I lived, quote unquote, in a heterosexual way for 40 something years. Mm-hmm. And so queer seems to align more with that than lesbian. Because I started off, Angela, with a lesbian label. But in that process, I didn't know if I could really own it. I felt like it would be challenged because of my late coming out or coming to or coming into. Mm-hmm. So it's really for the people, if you will. And it feels good to me because it kind of allows my whole evolution. Though I am in a lesbian relationship with my wife. Yeah. So that's how that kind of evolved or how I came to choosing the queer label.
I'm very intentional about us having that conversation because one of the things that it makes me understand and brings up the conversation I've had with other women about the naming of who we are and how we find so many younger women who are same gender loving, which is another term, who may in fact, in the way in which I would think about it, present as lesbian, call themselves queer, and choose that and very happy and are comfortable with that. And a lot of other women who have been lesbians and have had that attraction, that understanding, who've been in lesbian communities and find that naming to be a little bit scary because there almost is a sense of what's going to happen to the Black lesbian? Where are we going to go? What's going to happen to us if from the younger side, we're not seeing women claim this term lesbian or Black feminist lesbian or Black lesbian feminist, whatever. I mean, are we going to have a situation where we become muted within other communities? I think some of our listeners may have some questions about the naming, how they name themselves and how other women name themselves. And also, I think some of our listeners from the jump where we've started out may say, whoa, I mean, these women are very open and honest about who they are, who they love, and how they move in the world, particularly in an area where we revere respectability and we're not always honest and open about who we are. And you all are that in your social media presentations and the way in which you move in the world. You're just honest and open. How did you get to a place where you're comfortable just saying, hey, this is us, and we're going to share that with you?
Mm-hmm. Well, like I say this often on This Is Us, that I'm an open book. I don't really know how else to be. And it might be because I like talking and hearing people's feedback about what I'm saying. I don't know, but I have just always been open. And and maybe it's because I'm a writer who details my ideas and feelings, that it's easy to also talk about them. But I just find it easier to just be open and transparent. I've never felt otherwise.
Yeah, that's not my testimony. It's more of a intentional action for me. I tend to be cautious about what am I sharing, but because I understand connection comes through being authentic, then transparency is necessary. And so, with us sharing our story, that has to be at the helm of it. Mm-hmm. Being totally authentic. I know that Kendra will prompt me sometime or prod me. She's like, no, give the details, go a little bit deeper. On a personal TikTok that I'm doing, she said, you need to share some more details about that. And I said, you're right. So getting out of the habit of being private, yeah, is a journey for me. And so I think us is helping me on that journey.
One of the things that I always love about Audre Lorde is her idea that we should keep all of our identities afloat. And you can't let the various parts of you be pushed down, but you have to always keep them afloat. And when it comes to who we are, particularly as Black lesbians and Black queer women, some people are so afraid of being that honest and open in a world where they feel threatened by that type of authenticity of showing up in the world. I want to talk about, because we are so honest and open on the podcast, and particularly with what you all are talking about, tell us how you came together and how you came to the place of this incredible social media opportunity of your This Is Us Unscripted series, and why that's so important.
Angela, I appreciate you talking about This Is Us like we have 1 million followers, as if we even have 550.
You should have 1 million.
Appreciate it, because you're speaking it into existence.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
It is encouraging. But the reason why we started doing This Is Us on social media, that is the question, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and how you came together.
Okay. Mm-hmm. I think it's Cyndi and I are talkers.
We are.
Even though on This Is Us, it seems that I am talking more. That's the classroom teacher in me. But Cyndi and I often tell Cyndi, don't talk to me first thing in the morning, because next thing you know, I look up and it's 2:00 and I haven't done anything because we've been sitting here talking. And so
I love to talk, Angela.
She is a talk therapist and I'm a teacher. So, I think, I don't know who suggested it. I don't know if it was, maybe I did.
You did.
But because I have often shared my story and people have a lot of opinions about it. I was 17 when I met a 42-year-old woman in church who was my first lover. And we are still in contact. And I share that story and I get, of course, lots of mixed reviews, a lot of feedback I'm not really interested in. But then I've seen, especially on Lifetime, where there's these women who have had relationships with children, right? And people can't really understand how this woman could do this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or my favorite movie, Carol. Carol, what's the name of the book? It's named after the book. Salt. It's Salt.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this white woman who is attracted to a younger girl. And I'm like, this is happening. These things are happening. It's not just me, right? I'm not an anomaly. My story is not special. It's different, right? But it's happening. And then here's Cyndi.
Yeah.
Cindy's story is like just floors me.
Yeah, that's what she said. She's like, you need to tell your story. You need to share your story. And, when you're walking in your own journey, you don't see it necessarily how impactful it can be to somebody else. So Kendra's like, we need to get on social media and share our stories about who we are.
As Black women, because there's so many stories about white women doing these things, coming out late.
Right.
Yes.
Relationships with younger people, and I'm like, here it is. We're two Black women. We know spirit, love Jesus, but we're not religious, right? We have these careers. And why aren't we telling these stories for other Black people?
Yeah. And it's healing. To tell your story is so healing. So that's why I said yes.
Yep.
That's a good idea. I think we will.
Yeah. And the dream, right, is to have like 1 million followers and be on podcasts. And ultimately, because I am a writer before I am a speaker or podcaster, is I have wanted Cyndi to write her story, and so I think this is the beginning of being able to tell to tell a story through a traditional medium, because I am a writer and reader first.
Yeah. That's how it came to be.
Well, we've got a little glimpse of your story, Cyndi, and now I'm interested to know the full story because Kendra's put it out there. There's some salient points we've not heard yet on the podcast.
There are some huge points to my story that you haven't heard. There's a lot to my story you haven't heard.
Will we be hearing them more on This Is Us, or are there just more salient points that will be written down, or how will we hear more about these points?
Probably a combination.
Yeah. And when we started This Is Us on Instagram, we did start with our coming out, and we talked a lot about where we've come from. And then we paused for maybe like a year where we stopped doing This Is Us.
Yeah, we were doing the wedding.
Yeah, we were prepared for the wedding and all those things. And then, hindsight, we're like, yeah, we should have been recording that whole process. But I think that speaks to our entire lives aren't lived on social media, right?
Yes.
Some things are not just private, but sacred.
Yes.
I have had the thought to take what's on Instagram, has been archived on Instagram, and just replay them so that folks who are new to This Is Us can get those backstories without us having to re-record them. Stay tuned.
Oh, definitely. This is a date night activity for me and Marianne. We just love it. This is wonderful. Separate beds, going Dutch. What?
Separate beds sometimes, not all the time. Not all the time. Yeah.
We love it. And one of the reasons I love it so much is because I think about, as a woman who came out in my 30s, early 30s, yet realized when I was in college, I think I like women. But I buried that, and I buried it so deep that it didn't come up for 10 years. And I really was hit. It's like a slap in the face when I realized, oh, so you're a lesbian. And I think that the more as younger women, we have resources and information about what is possible. That changes the scope of one's life and how one can go in the world. So I always celebrate things like you all are doing and your ability to share your story. It's highly important. It's sacred. I'll use your word. It's sacred work. It really is sacred work to share our stories and realize that it makes a huge difference. I know women who are in their 80s and are terrified of coming out, don't want to be identified as lesbians, don't even like to talk about it in the privacy of their own home because it's a scary situation for them. And there's some sorrow for me with that. And I can't change it. But I believe that the more we are out in the world and people hear our voices and see our faces, it changes what is possible. So I will always celebrate the work you do and know that 1 million are coming. 1 million are coming. So you keep on, because I got to keep listening to hear all these points of information that I don't have and can't get today. But let's talk about how you all met and how long have you been married?
We've been married 10 months.
Yeah, it'll be a year in April.
And how long have you known each other?
2020?
Yeah. So 3 years, 3.5 years.
Now, Angela, because we met during COVID, that year feels like it could be 10.
It really, yeah.
And the reason I say that is because our meeting during COVID allowed us an intimacy, a solitude together. There's an avoidance of pomp and circumstance. When Cyndi and I first laid eyes on each other in the flesh, was just recovering from a hysterectomy. And even when we had our first phone calls, I was going in for that hysterectomy the night before.
So you want to wind it back a little bit and talk about how we met each other?
We met each other on Facebook dating.
Yes.
During COVID.
Yes.
Neither one of us was on Facebook dating for long.
No, a friend of mine had told me about Facebook dating.
Yeah.
She met some friend through Facebook dating. I was like, Facebook got a dating app? And she was like, yeah. So another friend of mine had told me, you need to go on and do some profiles with dating. And I'm like, I'm not interested in, no, I ain't trying to do that. And she was like, it's not all about that. Just go out there, create some profiles and make some friends. And so I thought, okay, because she was holding me accountable, and I did. And I had a subscription through an app, and it ended. And right at its ending, I was on Facebook one day and looked down in the toolbar, and there was this heart. And I thought, oh, this must be that dating app. I'm gonna go ahead and set up my profile. And probably within, I don't know, a couple of weeks, I saw Kendra's picture, and I thought, she's cute. She had one picture that just kind of pulled me in. I thought, what is she thinking on this picture? So I liked it. And I don't remember who liked who first.
Yeah, but I'm thinking like some of the other apps, you have to like each other in order for you to see each other.
Match. Yeah.
You have to match.
And we did. So then I think I sent the first hello. And then she responded. And I think I gave her my number and said, if you want to go off or did you give
Well, so Cindy's hello was hello with like 3 emoticons with hearts all over. And I was like, okay.
It was one emoticon.
It was like 3 of them. So just like respond back, right?
You know, this writer's going to tell us the story every time.
But I was just like, okay, I said, okay. So then, of course, when someone matches, you got to go back to their profile. Like, who is this? Let me go look. And I was like, oh, she's cute. And she was within she was within the 2 hours. I wasn't interested in traveling to meet anybody because I'm in Greensboro. And at the time, Cyndi was like 30 minutes away from Charlotte.
Right. Yes.
And so that put her within my frame, if you will.
Radius.
Yes. And so Cyndi and I started texting. Our texts were long.
They were
blogs. And that's when we decided to exchange numbers, right? Because there were long blogs, and then sometimes there would be a lapse in time with responses, right? Mm-hmm. And so, because I was scheduled to have surgery, I think like that Monday or Tuesday or whatever, Cyndi and I decided to talk the weekend before.
Yes,
and
so we had a phone call.
Yeah, we had a phone call, and when I tell you, Angela, we was on the phone from like 9 until 2 in the morning.
Hours.
It's like we had already known each other. And Cyndi laid out her whole life story to me.
She got the high overview. Okay. She got the high overview.
And the conversation
was unusual for me because, as I stated before, I typically take time in revealing myself to someone. But Kendra did feel like family. She felt safe. And so we went into some deep places.
We did, and I don't share the story often. I did share it with, I think, my Aunt Darlene, who is since now an ancestor. But after my hysterectomy, so Cyndi and I were in conversation, and I even talked to Cyndi the day after my surgery. There were some complications, so I had to spend the night in the hospital longer. And so Cyndi and I were still in communication. And
I was surprised. I didn't expect us to talk. I knew she was having surgery. I thought it might be a week or so. And so I was really surprised when she gave me a call.
And my nurses' names, they were both women, and their names were Don and Mary. And my father's name is Don, and his mother's name is Mary, and they both are ancestors. And when I got back home, Cyndi and I, again, we were on the phone nonstop. And the technology, for whatever reason, Angela, there was this one time when the phone kept dropping.
Yeah.
We could not hear each other. It was just these weird things happening with technology. And as Cyndi said earlier, she's all into the spiritual metaphysics, right? And so all that was happening. And then a song that I had shared with Cyndi.
Yes.
Is a Kanye West song. And it's from Kanye West's gospel album. And I had shared it with Cyndi because, we're nerds and we lesbians. So we shared like a playlist while I'm in the hospital. She going to listen to these songs. And she going to give me songs to listen to. And we in our exchange playlist, right? And so mine had, Kanye West, hers had India Ari,
Yeah.
And so while we're on the phone, Cyndi was like, oh my gosh, this Kanye West song just started playing. And the Kanye West song that I shared with her, and I can't recall the name right now, but the gospel song is the gospel song reminds me of being back at home at my grandmother's church.
They pulled the cover.
Yeah. He covered one of those songs.
Yeah.
And again, the lines just but we kept trying to talk with each other. So then Cyndi pulls in her spiritual knowing and says,
I was like, wait a minute.
I think someone's trying to come through.
Yeah.
Now, remember, these nurses are Don and Mary, right? And I had these complications. I'm having a hysterectomy. And Cyndi, we're not knowing each other well, but feeling like family, she says, do you mind if I just
try to do this with you?
Yeah, bear with me. Yeah. Because someone's trying to come through. And Angela, Cyndi described my grandmother's house. And we don't know each other, but we know each other, right? And for me, that was the connection. We were in such, not just a sacred space, but we both were being very transparent and brave.
And vulnerable.
Yeah, vulnerable and brave. And I received it. And that, Cyndi hasn't done that for me anymore. I don't think that's happened before, but it just felt.
There was a slight come through with your auntie, but
yeah,
I'd never done that.
She had never done that.
Wow.
And she was like, I'm hearing this, I'm seeing these. And she was describing things and saying things that I knew.
Yeah, that resonated with her.
And
so it became clear that it was her father and her grandmother.
Yeah.
That were coming through with the same names as the nurses, Don and Mary.
And I think that settled me in it secured me in feeling safe with Cyndi and spiritually connected, because when I got on Facebook dating, no one told me about Facebook dating. I just saw this heart. And I feel like I was just kind of like wasting time. It was COVID. I was just bumping around, And I landed there and did a profile page, wasn't thinking anything of it. And usually I've never had any luck. No one ever came through. People say hi to you, be like, hi, and then it's just crickets, Yeah. Or the interactions are superficial. But Cyndi and I were going deep even in our texting, and then the phone call got deep. And then even the music we shared with each other, the songs were deep. And it was just like we met I think, if people were open to it, COVID allowed us to be with spirit. If we allowed it to be, because we had to be with ourselves, everything shut down.
Yeah.
And it was a time of solitude and reflection and just being and gratitude and surrender. If we could turn down all the other noise of COVID, right?
Right. Thank you for sharing that with us. That's a beautiful and powerful visitation.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, with that coming through, was there anything specific that, if you don't mind sharing, specific that was told, or was it just the confirmation that you were in a good space with Cyndi and all was well, and we agree this is confirmation?
Mm-hmm. Well,
it was less about us and more about this message was solely for Kendra, in their love, protection, in their support and encouragement through her hysterectomy. And in this moment, I didn't understand why they were showing up in the ways that they were then, as I am more understanding of it now. And the loss that she went through by having a hysterectomy, it was more than just a medical procedure. You know, there was a lot of hope that had been wrapped around the womb, because, you know, this is something my wife wanted for herself. So now I understand why they were showing up for her. I divinely was appointed to say yes to them, so that she could get the message on the heels of the surgery that she just had.
But the messages like Cyndi talked about the color of the house. I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget. So I have to go back to my notes, because when Cyndi was telling me, I was writing down everything. Like later, when I could recall it, I was writing it down. At the moment, I was just in it. But Cyndi did talk about the color of my grandmother's house. I feel like you described a room or something, a back room, and I was saying, yep, all that. So there's things that she, almost as though my grandmother had to affirm so that I could believe it. She had to give me some details so I could believe this thing is happening. And then I could remember Cyndi saying that my father told me to smile more. If I'm not mistaken, something like that.
Something about a smile. I can't remember. I didn't write it down because I was
channeling.
Yes. And I could, it had kind of taken me off guard. But once I knew what it was, I thought, well, I'm just going to do my best with it and give her what I feel like is coming through.
Yeah. And all those technological hiccups was them trying to come through. And once I think Cyndi said yes, it stopped. And the phone call was clear as day. No interruptions as Cyndi was then speaking whatever they said to deliver.
That's powerful. Oh my gosh, that's powerful. Cyndi, is this a gift that you have used a lot, or was this something that was new to you, and have you used it since?
It was brand new. I had never done that. I'd never been a medium for anyone in that way. Since then, I've given messages because I also am a Reiki master. So I've had messages to give to people, but have not been able to, not necessarily in the same ways with Kendra, where they recognize, who it was or who this person is speaking is more spiritual. The spirit is giving you this message. So in that way, yes. But as far as connecting our loved ones that are on the other side, no.
So some people may not be familiar with Reiki. Can you tell us a little bit more about that so our listeners can fully be in line with what you've just shared?
Sure. So Reiki is a modality, a healing modality that deals with our energetic being. Just right quick, there are 7 main chakra centers in our bodies that support our well-being, whether it's physical, mental, and emotional. And just by way of life, those chakras get unbalanced or imbalanced. Sometimes they get stuck. And when we perform Reiki, we're connecting with Source to assist the alignment of those chakras so that you are functioning at your highest and best self. It's normally done through, can be done either through hovering the hand over those main chakras or laying the hands on those chakras.
I'm not a Reiki master, but I just want to add, human beings are energy. I think, and
Yes.
that's the important to note too, to understand how Reiki works. What do you mean energy? We are the energy.
Yeah.
We are the
And this,
energy.
is now scientifically, I know sometimes this stuff can sound very foreign, or is fleeting, but there is now a science behind the energetic body, how our hearts throw out energetic readings 3 feet from us, how there is a meridian system that runs through, that acupuncturists, acupressurists doing tapping, all of these things now are scientifically studied. You have a lot of clinical studies that show that it's effective in the areas of anxiety, depression, pain, weight loss, and cravings. So sometimes some of us need the black and white, more of the scientific to be able to take hold of it. And then others of us, take hold of it through our own knowing and connecting to ancient wisdom. So yeah, that's a small snippet of what Reiki is.
That's powerful. I think it's also interesting as you talked, Kendra, about this technology breakdown and clearing the way for the ancestors to come through as a way of saying, "Stop, listen." That this is coming through, because oftentimes we don't listen. Our world is so busy and so filled with so much noise that I think there may be so many opportunities for us to get some information from ancestors, but we're so filled with noise in our own personal lives that we can't even hear it.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I go back to what Kendra said earlier about 2020 giving us the opportunity to go within our homes, be within ourselves, so that we could be open for these types of connections. And to know that, it didn't end with 2020. 2020 may have been the portal, the opening to understand that our ancestors are always communicating with us. And we all have the ability to hear them. We just need to, like you said, quieten the noise. Sometimes it's fear, oh my God, I don't want them to show up. What are they going to say? What's going to happen? Because we've watched all of these stories and movies and, things that make us afraid. And so that in itself can cause us to shut down or not be available to their movies and their showing up and their speaking to us.
There's a wonderful song that Sarah Vaughan sings, and others have covered it. I think Dee Dee Bridgewater covered it. I think the song's called Love Dance. But anyway, the lyric says, "Turn up the quiet."
Yeah.
And I've always loved that, turn up the quiet. I'm curious to know what you all would say about the ways in which, because we're in such a hectic world, that certainly as Black lesbians and Black queer women, we can create rituals and use resources to have some of that quiet space and remember the things that we learned in COVID. Because oftentimes we learn things, but we forget them when things go back, quote unquote, normal. And there's no going back to normal after COVID, certainly. But what are some rituals or resources or things that you all have used in your own personal lives to help you with balance and quietness, where you can be more perceptive of the world around you, because we live in such a fast-paced and wonky world at times?
Well, Cyndi is probably more intentional, and it might be because you wake up earlier than I do. But she has early morning quiet time alone with her.
I do. Yeah, I every morning, and most recently of this last 6 months, I've had even more opportunity to sit in the quiet. I cultivate a relationship with my ancestors by establishing an altar. So I have an altar, with all of my ancestors on it and some other pieces and things that remind me that the connection is right here. Lighting candles, burning incense, taking spiritual baths, help me to remember and hold on to that connection that has been building over years, right? But that became very big to me in 2019. So, there are ebbs and flows to it. But mostly, morning practice, morning. Now I'm trying to get more into a consistent practice of meditating because I know how helpful that is. And I help my clients with it. But I don't have a daily practice. So I'm working on building that now.
Mm-hmm. And I'm not as, I guess, I don't want to use the word committed, but maybe thorough as Cyndi. But when I do get up, I don't check my phone, like my emails, because I'm committing to a stretching practice.
Mm-hmm.
And so my stretching practice in the morning lasts for about 20 minutes, I would say. Right. I do that, but I'm not really good in, because I have not practiced sitting meditation, but I am a writer. And I can go hours with just writing and reading. And I find that intimacy with my subject or my author, or just even with myself if I'm writing poetry, is a quiet time. And it's a time when Cyndi knows I do not want to be around anyone. I just want to be really almost in like a cave of consciousness, if that makes sense. Which I have been working to create in the garage, just this a quiet space in that way. And so I find that reading and writing brings me in a peaceful solitude. That the older I get, the more I want. But as you said, Angela, and I think it's all part of, here's my Black nationalism coming in. It's part of this whole system where we are given all of these distractions. And I told Cyndi, I said, oh my God, like TV never goes off. And then you just get addicted, not to TV, not necessarily TV, but there's so much to do
with these screens.
And even trying to keep up with my students so that I can have relatable instruction would require me to engage the screen, that there's so many opportunities to be distracted. And so we do have to be intentional. And writing and reading does that. Because I can't have the TV on when I'm trying to read and write, not seriously.
Yeah.
Yes.
It didn't take much, 7, 10, 15 minutes. Is enough, whatever. I always tell my clients, whatever is sustainable. Sometimes we think about, folks, they've been in this prayer closet, they've been meditating for hours. But for most of us in this culture, in order for it to be sustainable, then it has to be 10, 15 minutes that you allow yourself to sit in quiet or just be with yourself. And that's enough to set an intention that can change your day. And that's all that's needed. And then we begin to see, as we move throughout the day, glimpses of spirit being, because then that attunes us to really being able to hear ancestors when they show up. We've opened ourselves, in those 5, 10, 15 minutes.
And we live in a world where it doesn't pay for individuals to be within the interior of their lives and be connected, because then you're not putting your time, which is, for me, wealth, into that TV series, which, you can binge watch them and say, I've just spent 13 hours on this stupid show. Did I really spend 13 precious hours binge watching this show? How did that happen? I mean, really, how did that happen? And it's not This Is Us. It's not something special. It's a show about these children who are hybrids and they're living in this post-apocalyptic world. And I've spent 13 hours watching it and waiting for the sequel, the next season.
Right.
What happens with us when we allow ourselves to get wrapped into these things? And I just feel a real need for us to just massage what you all have just said, because it's so important when we take that time out and do something creative or have that spiritual space. I can't begin to tell you what a difference it makes for me to go out and just listen to the bird song in the morning. We no longer have our dog with us. We had to say goodbye to her a few months ago, but we would go for walks. And she would stop to listen to the birds, and I would stop to listen with her. And it was just amazing. But we don't often do that because life is so busy. But note to self and note to our listeners, take some time today. Like Cyndi said, just 7 to 10 minutes. It doesn't take much. And to get into that interior space. Let's go back just a little bit because I'm curious, Cyndi, to know if your relationship with Kendra was the first relationship you had after being married to a man.
No.
Okay.
I had one other relationship between being married and Kendra. It was a significant relationship. Learned a lot. It was a friendship that turned into a romantic relationship. It ended abruptly. I didn't foresee that. And so I was pretty hurt by that ending. But believe, of course, there could be love again. Licking my wounds, if you will, healing on a level, on a superficial level. Healing sometimes takes time, depending on how deep the wound is. And then learning what there was from that teacher, because I believe that we, as Kendra said in some of our we learn in relationship to others. And that relationship taught me a lot about me and relationship, perseverance, and resilience. So, yeah, I'm thankful for that relationship. I think without it, this one wouldn't be possible.
What provided the point of reckoning for you when you understood that, I had these feelings as a young teenager, young girl, married to a man, but there's something else that's percolating. What was the moment that kind of brought that to the forefront for you to understand that there was another way that you wanted to be in the world?
It was through a death. My then daughter-in-law was killed. It was a automobile accident, and spirit. It's like I was shaken. Not just by the death, but like spirit shook me and asked me and said to me, "What are you doing? Time is relevant here. You cannot continue to go on putting yourself on the back burner and not looking at what's in front of you." So that was the catalyst. That was the thing that really caused me to say, okay, because there had been years where I was recognizing what was happening, and that just kind of nailed it for me. Like, okay, you're going to have to show up for you. You have to show up for you. I don't know how many years I have, and so that death really centered that for me. And so that's when I said, okay, and I began to accept it and open up to it. And so it wasn't long after that, not long at all, that I asked for a divorce. Probably a month later. Yeah, a month later, and yeah, that whole journey, and those are the salient points. Like that whole journey was very difficult. I had two children who they were teens, and changing their life, feeling all of that, feeling guilty, feeling responsible for hurt, for change, not really knowing what anything's going to look like. And then their father, of course, it was very hard. And Angela, I didn't have the courage to be honest with him, even though there had been points and places in our relationship. Our relationship was over. It had been for many years, but we had agreed verbally or non to stay in this relationship. But once that death happened, I knew I couldn't no longer be there. I knew I was having feelings and recognized for this other woman, and recognize within myself that is who I am and have been for many years. But just had swiped it to the side, had just could not embody it. I would play it down. I would tell myself, oh, I even told myself, all women feel like this. We just don't talk about it. All the mental acrobats I went through to get to my truth is just um gosh, I lose words sometimes when I'm trying to describe these things. Unbelievable, just beyond the what I went through within myself. Then I was afraid, am I just going through a phase? I was 45, maybe this is midlife crisis. And it was, but in a way of waking me up. Like, you don't have forever. So either you're going to live your life authentically or you're not. And to me, to not live it authentically means death. It means sickness. It means disease. It means lack. So I did choose me. It was not without a lot of losses and hurt. But I did. And my sons are here. They love me. They're with their mom. So that was my prayer. If everybody else can fall off the face of the earth if they need to, as long as I have my two sons with me, then nothing else matters. And that prayer it was held. So I'm thankful for that. Yeah, grateful. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for sharing that with us. That's very powerful. And I know it's going to be a healing point for so many women who are afraid of honoring the change within them. Change is not just about quarters, dimes, and nickels and pennies. I mean, it's about that real thing in life where we can get hooked up to, as you said, listening to spirit and understanding that if you're going to live your life, now is the only time to really do it. So that's powerful. Thank you for sharing that with us. I feel like we could just talk forever. I love y'all. Yes, y'all are talkers. I love it. I love it. Absolutely love it. And one of the things that I love about This Is Us Unscripted series is because you talk about things that will cause change, can cause change to so many of us because we are used to normalcy. In terms of, and I mentioned this earlier, okay, we're a couple, we're going to stay in the same bed. Okay, we're dating, or you're going to pay for my meal. All these different ways that we have been taught that this is what it means to be in relationship. And we can stick like that for all of our lives and not realize that because we're afraid of changing or even exploring what spirit presents, that we may miss out on something. So I want to just talk a little bit about the courage of being able to do something different and honoring your spiritual understanding that your relationship is yours. It's not mapped or charted by what other people do, but the love you all make together.
Well, I as a writer and a reader, I am often reading myself, reading my life, and writing it out. And I'm so thankful that my mother is still alive because often I call her to help so she can help me with my memories. And so as I'm writing different things out and having conversations with Cyndi and thinking about myself, I think about as traditional as it seemed. When you're growing up, you just think what's happening in your house is it is the norm. Everybody kind of doing it, right? My mom and dad were married. My dad has been deceased for over 20 something years. And my dad would play pinochle over the weekend, right? And Kylie and I would sleep with my mom. It was like a good time, spend the night with mommy, and my mom would stay up late and we'd be watching TV. And my mother's mom, Rose, she had this Asian aesthetic. She had a round bed, and the older I get and start thinking about my childhood and things that I can remember seeing in my parents and my grandparents, I'm realizing some of their non-traditional behaviors. My daddy did not mow the lawn. My daddy loved to cook. My daddy was I saw my daddy cry. We cried in Titanic, the movie. And I'm thinking, like my dad isn't this manly man, but he's, this man. And my mom was, she was non-traditional her own way. She got a master's degree and my daddy was at home taking care of the children while she was getting a higher degree, right? And so I'm as I'm getting older, I'm noticing all these differences and things that my grandparents did that aren't necessarily normal. And so I think in watching them and reflecting on my childhood and talking to my mother now and talking with Cyndi and talking to myself, it informs how I live in relationship with Cyndi. And my mom and dad never did not allow me to be myself. And I was real different than my sisters, right? And so their being an example and their parents being an example and their own siblings being an example of what it didn't look like to, what it looked like to live in your own rhythm allowed me to be that way in my relationship with Cyndi. And thankfully, because this hasn't always been the case, I met a person in Cyndi who also wants to live in our own rhythm and not what we have been told is the rhythm.
Yeah, that wasn't my experience growing up. My experience was more of the status quo. Men do this, women do that. If you get married, this is how it should play out, to include sleeping in the same bed every night. Women tend the children and men go out and work. And a lot of that I embodied when I was married to my father's children. Church was played a huge role in our life. And so, how the church says, and I'm going to say not what Jesus said, because a lot of what we do in church, Jesus didn't have nothing to do with that. This dogma that comes about. I wanted it. I opened my heart completely for all the dogma because this was the right way. This is how it's supposed to be. And I have my constitution has been, I want to be right. I want to be right and acceptable. So that steered how I showed up in the world. I got married at 24. I was engaged at 23. So I was a young woman who did not have much of any other experiences. I completed my undergrad as a married person with children. So that was later in life. So I didn't go off to college to see how other people lived. It was very within a box of my understanding about how I should live and show up in the world. And then I guess some of the impact from other ways of being came about through reading, probably the screens, just different things I heard in spirit. Some things I heard in church, it just did not come over right. It just didn't land right. I had a lot of questions. Why is this? This doesn't, line up. Let's talk about this. And there was nobody to have those conversations within my circle. Now, there may have been people at the church that I attended, but within the circle I was in, they were holding tight to the dogma that they knew. And I respect that to a level. But it was within those confines that I got an idea about how to be in relationships. So when I met Kendra, after having left that marriage and been through a relationship, I was ready to do something that I could call my own and that I could create. When I met Kendra, she was a fire starter for sure. And I knew that if I wanted to hang with this woman, I need to really embrace what I said I wanted to do. So it hasn't been smooth, this way of being, figuring out who Kindy is and how we want to be with each other. But it has been rewarding for my own personal growth, more than anything, as well as our coming together, our togetherness.
Can I want to add, since Cyndi mentioned the church, I think I'm going to argue that many people, black or white, that they learn how to be in relationship because of what's happening in church. And Cyndi, lightweight as a pastor, she can throw scripture at you like but my parents didn't require my sisters and I to go to church. They were in bed on Sunday. And matter of fact, it was my twin sister and I who wanted to go to church. And my aunt, my daddy's sister, would carry us. And my mom and dad didn't tell us we had to think any kind of way. We told them we were going to get baptized. We told them when to come. We told them when to come to the church program, and they came. But that has been, I think, has been very different between Cyndi and I, and my experiences with a lot of other Black women is that I wasn't beat down by the church. It was my choice. And my parents did not live a religious life, but they knew Jesus, right? Nikki Giovanni said, Nikki Giovanni James Baldwin said, Jesus belonged to Black people and God are white folks. And that's what it is. We have this spiritual expression. I think church can be an expression, and the Bible and music can be an expression. And I think I saw those expressions in my mom and dad, but we were not in a religious household, even though we had the 10 Commandments up. It was not a religious, it was just Black expression.
Yeah.
We're in sin.
Yeah, it was different. I will say in my childhood, my mom did not require me to go to church either, which I'm thankful for, meaning she didn't beat me over the head with scripture, or that there was a prescribed way of being with God. I kind of found that on my own. It kind of got derailed once I got married, because there was a setting that the household we were part of, as far as the church, I think they were very loving. The pastor, I have nothing but good things to say about him, God rest his soul. But the overall arching dogma that we prescribe to as a Black church permeates throughout, even if the pastor isn't necessarily preaching hell and brimstone. Thankfully, the pastor I sat under for those first 12 years that I was married, he did not. But there again, there were people that did believe that were in the body and did, you heard those things. So even though the pastor wasn't preaching that, it's still that dogma comes through. And that's what I felt. And after so many years, I began to get into kind of a warring with it. But that's for another interview.
I feel like Black folks got the smell of church on them the same way when you cook catfish in the house and you go outside to the store or somebody else and you sniff your shirt. I smell like catfish. Black folks got that smell of church on them because it just permeates so much of what we do and how we move in the world. Sometimes that's good. Sometimes that can be problematic. For the millions of people who will watch and listen to you all, how can they get connected with what you're doing on social media?
Well, our combined social media is We Are Kindy, and it's we period RARE period Kindy KINDY. So whether you're on Instagram or TikTok, it's the same.
Yes.
So it's we period R period Kindy.
Lovely. And we'll put that in the show notes for our listeners so they can enjoy the wealth of all that you bring to the world. My question I always ask my guests at the end, is there something I missed? Is there something that you want to say to our listeners that I didn't provoke with the question? What's the final word? What do you want to share with our listeners before we close out today?
Well, since this is ZAMI NOBLA, inspired by Audre Lorde ZAMI, I wanted to add a couple of things. Is Audre Lorde says she believed all women were lesbians. She says this in an interview, that all women are lesbians, and she also says that poetry, the creative writing, this poetry is this divine space wherein she can bring all of herselves into communion and conversation and reflection, and then bring it back out to the world, right? And so Audre Lorde also acknowledges our many selves, how we show up in the world, right? Poetry is not a luxury. And I would argue, and I don't know if Audre Lorde would believe it, but I think none of the creativity that Black women or Black people do at all is a luxury. Because it's through that creative medium that we can be open to the divine and then say yes to other relationships and other ways of showing up and being in the world. Thank the Lord.
Thank the Lord indeed. Thank the Lord indeed. For she is wonderful.
Right.
Kendra and Cyndi, thank you for being part of our Black lesbian history.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Yes. Thank you.
Turn up the quiet, y'all. Turn up the quiet and go on the inside and come to fully appreciate yourself so that when you come out into the world, there is much light to be given and shared. And keep it all afloat, as we were talking about with Kendra and Cyndi. What an incredible conversation. I'm so grateful for the sacredness of the moment when they would share their time, which is wealth, share their wealth with us, talking about their lives, their love, and how they move in the world. What a great joy. I hope that you, as a listener, appreciate all the work that goes into the ZAMI NOBLA podcast. And if so, I ask you to leave a rating and a review wherever you listen to the podcast, and share an episode with a friend. Send them a link to one of your favorite episodes. We have so many more incredible episodes coming up, and I just appreciate you being a listener. Appreciate you sharing the wealth of your time with the podcast, and know that there are many more coming this year. And we just really, again, appreciate your being part of it. So with that, I say, my friends, turn up the quiet, enjoy some interior time in your life, massage the meaning of who you are, and don't get tricked up by all the noise and the shiny lights of the lives we live. Thanks for listening, and until next time, have a sweet one.